Hey guys, today we are going to discuss how to create a thesis statement, and we are going to particularly focus on the idea of creating your thesis statement for Fahrenheit 451 and for this upcoming essay. In general, you have several options. You can look at a character and how that character is created in the novel, their characterization, and how that affects the theme. You can look at symbolism and different symbols seen throughout the novel and how they connect to the theme, or you might want to do just a basic theme in general, but we'll talk about it as we go through and practice some together. Okay, so first off, it's very important that you understand that a thesis is both a subject and an opinion. It's both of those things. You have to have the opinion portion or it's not a thesis statement, bottom line. If you say that Texas is a state, that's not a thesis statement. That has no opinion to it. It is a fact. So it doesn't work. If you say that Fahrenheit 451 is about censorship, not really a thesis statement. It's so close to being a fact. It's so borderline not arguable in any way that it really wouldn't work. In the grand scheme of things, you need a statement that someone could argue with you about. That's what you're looking for. So it tells you about not only the topic, which our topic would be 451. Sorry, I'm getting used to this highlighter thing, guys. Our topic would be 451, but it also tells you about the argument that you intend to make about that topic, okay? So whatever argument you want to make, that's what it focuses on, is those two things. You have to have, of course, your topic in it. So you're going to have to say something like, in Fahrenheit 451, in Bradbury's novel, Fahrenheit 451, something along those lines will have to be included. But then, of course, you include your argument. It is your opinion. One thing that you need to understand is that you are intended to back it up. That is something that is required of you. That's the whole purpose of the paper. You write the thesis, and then all the rest of the paper is about proving the thesis. Like the entire paper is about proving the thesis. You use quotes and you explain these quotes to support your point and to further prove your ideas. So let's go through this and let's look at basically some good thesis statements versus bad thesis statements, and we'll talk about what makes them good, what makes them bad, so on and so forth. This very first one in the book Fahrenheit 451, Ray Bradbury shows us how happiness is impossible to achieve. So right off the bat, we have some issues. I'm going to give you just a second to think about it, like what you think these issues might be. If you thought of the idea that it says us, you would be correct. If I can get it to highlight it. This is first person, and we are not supposed to write in first person. You can't say us. You could say it shows the reader how happiness is impossible to achieve. It shows the audience how happiness is impossible to achieve, but you can't say us. No first person. No I, no me, no my. Don't put anything in there that says I think that the book Fahrenheit 451, da 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 da. I feel, I believe. None of that needs to be in there. Now let's look at your second one. Ray Bradbury's novel, Fahrenheit 451, is a book about firemen burning books in which Montag and Beatty are at odds with one another because of the fear the government has created, and it is this that causes all the problems. So I'm going to give you once again a second to kind of think about what kind of issues that could be occurring with this. Okay, let's look at it. If you guess that the repetition is a problem, you are correct in that avenue. It's a book about burning books. It just really, you need to stop that. Quit repeating. Hopefully most of you picked up with your short answers that repetition is a problem, you need to change up the wording. I mean, you could do something very simple like say, it's a novel. It's just very repetitive. Another issue with this, just honestly, it is a fact. This is no way or in no way arguable. You can't argue any of this. All of this is 100% true. If you were presenting this to, say, a friend or a neighbor or somebody of that nature, they couldn't say anything about it because it's a fact. No questions there. This all does happen. It is a book about Montag and Beatty burning books. It is a book in which they do fight and come at odds with each other. It is about fear of the government. That is in there. It is next to impossible to argue that that is not in there. It is impossible to argue that Montag is not afraid of the hound. He is not afraid of being caught by Beatty. If he wasn't afraid, he wouldn't run. So this is definitely not workable just for the simple fact that it is a fact. So just to recap, no first person, avoid repetition, and let's not use facts. Let's use stuff that we can actually argue. So let's look at the third one. Fahrenheit 451 is a book about governmental control. Let's think. What could possibly be wrong with that? Okay, now I know I haven't given you a long time, but the longer I give you, the longer you have to watch this video. It is way, way, way too vague. Okay, what about government control? What are they telling us? Are they telling us that government control is bad? Or is Ray Bradbury telling you that government control is unhealthy, that government control is necessary, that government control is what? What's going on with government control? Without adding that extra little step, this too is actually also a fact. It is a book about government control, and it would be virtually impossible to argue that it is not, because the government is controlling its citizens. So once again, not really working here. So you've got this whole issue with facts that you want to avoid. You want to avoid being vague. Yes, this is a subject within the book, but what is it telling you about the subject? And of course, you want to avoid repetition and first person. So the fourth bad thesis is book burning the beginning of our downfall. All right, I'm going to give you a minute just again to see if you can guess what you think might be the issue here. All right, for starters, it has our in it. This is first person. We don't need to put that. What you can say in place of this would be societies, mankind's, humans, peoples. There's a million Americans, although that's very specific to our country, and I think it's kind of more of a worldwide thing. But either way, the nations. There's a lot of possibility you can go there with third person, so you need to get rid of that first person. The other issue, this is a question. You cannot have a question as a thesis statement. By definition, a thesis statement is a statement. It is literally in the title. That means it ends in a period, not a question mark. So you cannot have a question as your thesis statement. Also, I would like to throw in there, you do not need to be including rhetorical questions for your intro. They are very basic, and you need to try and think of other ways in which you can introduce your paper. I'm going to go over and give you some examples when we go through the student essay. So if we haven't already, I guess when you watch this, we've already gone through the student essay, but you don't need to be introducing with questions. You need to avoid that at all costs. Okay, it's not original whatsoever. Let's look at number 5, bad thesis. Did you listen to him? He knows all the answers. He's right. Happiness is important. Fun is everything. And yet I kept sitting there saying to myself, I'm not happy. I'm not happy. Bradbury 68. All right, I'm going to give you just a second and see if you can guess what's wrong with this one. Okay, this is a quote. A thesis statement has to be your opinion. This doesn't work. This is not even your writing. It's Bradbury's writing. You've even said that in your in-text citation. It has to be your opinion. So you cannot use a quote. Yes, you want to use quotes in your paper, but you cannot use one for a thesis statement. So to recap, you don't want any first person. Get rid of this first person. Can't have any questions for your thesis statement. You need to be very, very, very specific. Don't just give a broad idea like it's about government control. For starters, it could be misconstrued like what you have here as a fact, and avoid repetition. Finally, you can't use quotes because they're not your own writing. You've got to use your own opinion for your thesis statement. So some of these thesis statements meet all the criteria, like some of the ones we've got below, but they're too broad or too vague, like the ones we've got above. Your thesis needs to be as specific as possible. Specific, specific, specific. That is what you are going for. If you can include 2 to 3 main points, which you saw in the student example, that you will be discussing within your essay, you should do so. This technique is known as the closed thesis. Now, let me warn you, when you become a senior, Ms. Tolson doesn't like closed theses, but I do. And your sophomore teacher, Ms. Prefer, likes them, and Ms. Crouch likes them, and in college they like them. I don't know why Ms. Tolson doesn't, but she doesn't. That's her own prerogative. But if you know how to write one, then you'll know how to leave it open. It's actually easier to have an open-ended thesis than it is to have a closed thesis. So if you can do this, you can do the open-ended. So for my class and my purposes, you are going to need to try and write a closed thesis. So down here, what we have is 4 thesis statements that are actually not bad. They could work, but we want to improve upon them to make them better. Okay, so I'm just going to type in our improvements, and we will go from there. Hold on, let me change my ink color so that it's easy to see when you look at it. All right, so for the better thesis, the first one, it says, Bradbury shows that too much power will ultimately lead to destruction. I don't think it's bad. I think we need to be very specific, though. Let's say through hold on, I have to think, I'm sorry guys. So in Fahrenheit 451, I'm going to include my novel information. I can type. Bradbury, and I'm going to up my vocab, my diction. Demonstrates too much power. Wait, let's say. Let's back it up a little bit. Bradbury utilizes Montag, Beatty, and Faber to demonstrate that too much power will ultimately lead to destruction. And I might actually even move away from Faber and Montag. You could go with the mechanical hounds, maybe one of the other firemen. You could discuss just Beatty in general. You could also make it a little bit more open, like you could say in Fahrenheit 451, Bradbury uses symbolism, characterization, and the setting. Although, yeah, I could argue that. The setting to demonstrate that too much power will ultimately lead to destruction. And you could even, with the setting, I would focus on technology. So basically what I've done here is I've taken this thesis, which is really a pretty open thesis, okay? And I've made it very specific. What I have told my reader is that in paragraph 1, I'm going to have my intro. And then after my intro, the first thing I'm going to do is talk about Montag and how Montag and his power situation leads to his destruction. Then I'm going to talk about Beatty and how Beatty, oh no, I don't want to do all that. Stop that. And how Beatty's power leads to his destruction. Then I'm going to talk about Faber and how Faber's previous power, he no longer has it, right, leads to his destruction. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to talk about each one of them and what happens to them and how it affects them. That would be paragraph 1, 2, 3. So essentially I'd have my intro, second paragraph would be Montag, third paragraph would be Beatty, fourth paragraph would be Faber, and my fifth paragraph would be my closing. So I've got my paper laid out and I've told my reader that I'm going to talk about these 3 things in this order and that they're all going to connect to this idea that too much power will ultimately lead to destruction. In this second one, same idea. I'm going to, in that second paragraph after my intro, I'm going to talk about symbolism. I would probably focus on the hound, maybe some of the symbolism in technology. For instance, the machines that pump Mildred's stomach and give her the blood transfusion. I would focus on the idea that they are destroying society and that they are going to ultimately lead to our destruction. They have all this power to help us save our lives, but in fact, they're killing us. I would then talk about characterization, and I would focus probably heavily on Beatty and Beatty's characterization. And then finally, I would talk about setting. In setting, I would come back to technology if it was me and I was talking about this, and I would focus on the house and the technological advancements within the house that they live in, that Mildred and Montag live in. And I would spend that whole fourth paragraph talking about that and how the power it has over them leads to their destruction, specifically Mildred's for sure. So that is a great way to take this thesis and turn it into something better. All right, so let's do the next one. Let me see if I can get back to my pen. Okay. Oh, and it didn't change the color of my writing. All right. So, second thesis. Fahrenheit 451 displays the importance of rebellion. Once again, I'm going to be specific. So, through Montag's, well, let's do it this way. Through Montag, Faber, and the, what would you call them? I haven't read that part again yet. We'll call them the runaways. I don't know if y'all know what I'm talking about, but the people at the end of the novel, you'll get to them, that Montag meets when he crosses the river, which is great symbolism there. Anyway, through Montag, Faber, and the runaways, Fahrenheit 451, if I can type, displays the importance of rebellion. Once again, I've done the same thing as above. I've let my reader know very specifically through a closed thesis what I'm going to talk about, the order I'm going to talk about it in, and what direction I'm going to go. As above, you could still do symbolism. You could focus on the symbolism of the river. You could focus on the symbolism of the books burning, on the symbolism of the phoenix. All of those could be connected to the idea of rebellion. The symbolism of the salamander, all of those work when you're looking in the grand scheme of things. And you are connecting it all back to this idea the importance of rebellion. When you're doing this, don't go off and leave the actual bread and butter, so to speak, of your thesis. This part is borderline like your subject. This is what I'm going to be talking about, right? So it's all from Fahrenheit 451. I'm going to talk about Montag. I'm going to talk about Faber, and I'm going to talk about the runaways. This part is what I'm going to say that all of these things prove. So you need both parts. You need your subject and your thesis. And of course, to create that closed thesis. All right, so I'm going to do one more, and then I'm going to leave it to you guys. I'm not going to do that last one because I'm going to leave it for you to practice with. Because the thesis is already there for you, practicing making it more specific might be very, very beneficial. And maybe not. It's not like anybody's going to check on it, but I'm definitely going to leave it there for you to work with, okay? So let's go in and do this one right here. Montag and Clarice show how knowledge will eventually destroy us all. Well, the real issue with this is what? Think about it for just a second. Okay, hopefully you got it. First off, you need to include the fact that this is Fahrenheit 451, but you may have already done so in your intro. So you possibly could be okay with saying Montag and Clarice. I feel like just for writing a basic thesis statement, you definitely need it in there. Bradbury's or in Fahrenheit 451. I really can't type. Of course, I'm also in the dark. That doesn't help. Montag and Clarice. Let's up that diction. Demonstrate how knowledge will eventually be the demise of society. So I've done two things here. One, I've upped my diction level. I have gone in and taken some basic diction like show and flipped it to demonstrate. Okay, it's not big, but it's enough that it could make a difference as far as readability. I've also taken this destroy and I've upgraded it to demise. You definitely want to have that good high-level diction throughout. I've also gotten rid of something. Does anybody know what? Think about it for just a second. What did I get rid of in that previous thesis statement? What have I done in this thesis statement that's different? I hope that you said I got rid of this first person. I changed it to society. And that is how you get rid of that first person. Pick a third person group. Society, mankind, people. And instead of saying us, instead of saying me, instead of saying my, instead of saying we, use that group all the way through. All right, so like I said, I'm not going to do this last one. Bradbury demonstrates the importance of finding your own happiness. Through Montag, Clarice, and Beatty, we see how being unhappy can destroy your entire life. Oh, yes, I am. I can't help it. I wasn't going to, but I can't help it because I noticed something that's blaring at me and I have to fix it. All right, so can you guess? There's several issues with this, several things we need to fix. Can you guess what any of them are? Whoops. All right, for starters, this is two sentences, and a thesis statement has to be one. You can't have this. It's got to be one thesis statement. So I, right off the bat, need to find a way to combine these two statements. Another big issue, and I'm really glad this happened because I haven't covered this yet, your. So you may not realize it, but when you choose to write an essay, you pick a particular point of view. You can write in first person, you can write in third person. And in some instances, you do have cases where they write in second person. However, like the first person situation, that is reserved for the experts. Do not ever, in this essay or any essay that is AP driven, write in first or second person. Don't use you. And you're going to want to. You need to cut it out. You need to stop doing it. I will tag you and take points off for your and you the same way I will for we. So let's fix this particular thesis statement and get it where it is workable. Okay, so I can stick with the beginning. Bradbury demonstrates the importance, okay, wait, let's read it real quick. The importance of finding your own happiness. Let's actually flip it. Let's do this. So we'll say, once again, we're going to use in Fahrenheit 451 because it just flows nicely. Bradbury let's even flip it even more. In Fahrenheit 451, through Montag, Clarice, and Beatty, Bradbury, just one R, demonstrates how being unhappy can destroy one's entire life. Okay, there's another way. We can write this other ways too, which I'll show you in just a second. But if you cannot figure out how to get rid of you can use the phrase one or ones, and that will get rid of you. Instead of saying your, you would say ones, like ownership. And instead of saying you would say one. For instance, if you say the book demonstrates you're only as good as your self-esteem allows you to be, you say the book demonstrates one is only as good as his or her self-esteem allows them to be. So that's a really good trick for you guys as far as getting rid of that third person. So definitely feel free to do that as you need to. We could also flip this whole thing around. We still have our closed thesis going on, but we could come back and say Bradbury demonstrates how being unhappy can destroy one's entire life through his characterization of Montag, Clarice, and Beatty. Basically, you just flip it the other way. And I would love to say consume. Of Montag, Clarice, and Beatty. And I actually like this second one a little bit better because I've got my thesis first, the idea of being unhappy consuming you, and I have my layout second. I actually really kind of do like that a little bit better, but that's just a personal preference. It's not a necessity. Either way, in both situations, you have the thesis, okay, the basic opinion portion of it. And then I have my subject aspect, this part that demonstrates to the reader, these are the three things I'm going to be discussing. And then I know as the reader that they're going to come in this order. So what I want you guys to do now is to go through and post a practice thesis, if you will, to the discussion board. Try to come up with something that you would actually like to talk about. Of course, you need a theme, right? You need a theme. You need an idea that you think the story is trying to tell you about, or that Bradbury is trying to demonstrate. And then you just need to break down 3 ways that you see that and include that in your thesis and post it. And when you are responding to these, you will use these questions right here to help you respond to other people's posts. Anyway, guys, I hope this helped. I know this was a longer video than what you're used to, but it was a lot to cover. So if you have any questions, let me know, and I will help you as much as possible.